All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. One of the things about doing this show for as long as I have is that I'm often introducing myself to new artists that maybe weren't on my radar before. I think, as listeners know, I go to my way to try to follow everyone who has any connection to Manitoba music, Winnipeg, elsewhere in the province, anything like that, and on social media. And usually that kind of turns into me then going through that big list of people I followed and listening to them and finding the ones that interest me. So our guest on this episode is someone that I sort of stumbled upon in that way. And I think that the best way to start this off is if you want to introduce yourself and maybe give a bit of background about what it is you do.
Hi. Thanks for having me. My name's Alex Maher. I'm recently imported from Vancouver to Winnipeg in November of 2020 during the pandemic. My thing is mostly loop-based funk, soul kind of cool stuff. Very sax heavy. I also am a sort of a singer-songwriter, producer as well. So, it's kind of like a one-man project right now.
Yeah.
I was playing with like a 6-piece band back in Vancouver a couple years ago, and COVID happened, and also just solo efforts, solo loop artistry also happened as well. So.
Well, and I think the solo loop stuff is what initially got me interested in what you're doing, because I saw some of those videos you posted and I really dug it. And then that led me to sort of further explore your recorded stuff, which a lot of it was much more sort of almost funk pop in parts, and definitely that singer-songwriter vibe too, than I had expected from the loop videos. So it's cool to see like the different facets, because it was really funky and then still funky, but had some more of a I'm not sure the word is more I don't want to say mainstream, because it's not that, but more kind of digestible than like a hard funk sort of instrumental, right?
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate that.
So I guess just to place you, like, how did you get here? Why did you end up in Winnipeg after originally being out west?
My wife's originally from here. She grew up here, and we've been coming back here every Christmas and summer.
Okay.
Christmas and lake life and cool family times and stuff like that. But also over the years, Winnipeg's been such a strong musical hub. On any Western Canadian tour, any Canadian tour, you're going to hit Winnipeg. And I've played everywhere over the years, from the old Walker Theater to the zoo to Torque Brewery to Le Patio Toisson Quarante. Like, it's such a dope city. And when COVID hit and all the gigs evaporated and people pivoted and people have made decisions on what they were going to do, when we were like, let's go somewhere other than Vancouver, where it's not as incredibly expensive. And we were thinking Montreal, we were thinking Toronto, we were thinking Winnipeg, and we kind of just landed on Winnipeg. And man, it wasn't a hard decision for me at all. Like, I just know that Winnipeg has got such a great vibe and great scene. So it's been a really cool adventure since we've been here in November of 2020.
Right on. And I mean, I guess the obvious question to ask you then would be, how have you sort of fit into the local music scene now that you've been here? But there hasn't really been a scene in terms of live performances anyway, in almost a year and a half now. So have you been able to sort of figure out, get a grip on sort of like who's who in the music scene and all the venues and stuff? I know you said you've played a number of them before, but it's a pretty big, tight-knit community here. And I often wonder, when someone's coming from outside, whether it's how they navigate that, right?
I think I have like slightly exclusive access to some inside channels in Vancouver or in Winnipeg. Just having known friends like my friend Jorge in the Mariachi Ghost.
Cool.
Friends like my friend Sandy Toronto and Jamie Toronto. Kind of like Winnipeg legends in a way. And through them, I've met artists like Royal Canoe, Begonia, just like really, really dope Winnipeg performers. And just since being back here and like engaging what industry there is to be engaged in, in the pandemic, I was lucky, but also really sort of, how do I say, like, it was really cool to see that when I went out and looked at open mic nights on the internet in this area, which is weird, but it's on the internet in this area. The Whoop and Holler Festival had an open mic night that I hit up a few times. Manitoba Music had an open mic night that I hit up. And I was able to really connect, even though it was really separated and online and in a virtual environment. I was able to make some connections, and I ended up getting booked for the Whoop and Holler Festival on the Friday nights. It ended up getting rained out, but we still ended up doing the lineup in the hospitality tent, and I ended up jamming with the Prairie Joggers late into the evening on the Friday, and it was super fun. And like, there's so much music here. I mean, I mentioned it in an earlier interview this year, but I think Winnipeg might have the most long McQuades per capita that I've seen in a Canadian city, which says a lot for the musical magnitude that's going on
Yeah.
here.
A lot of people buying guitars. Yeah. So I noticed also that you seem to have done a lot of live streams and things like that during this weird lockdown time that everyone's going through. Was that mainly just to sort of keep yourself actively playing music in front of an audience, or what's the background behind that?
Going into late 2019, going into 2020, I started doing live session videos just for social media content and documentation and all that video stuff.
Yeah.
And my guitarist at the time, Ben Parker, still a great friend, but he's in Vancouver, but he's also doing a lot of media camera work with me. And we just started to realize that over time that like my rig that I had at the time was really noisy. My pedal board was just buzzing in all these different areas. Everything was buzzing. So I went through a bit of a gear spiral before COVID. It was really lucky that I did that. And I was also lucky to have, work in Vancouver to the point that I could even do that.
Okay.
But everywhere I replaced my entire pedal board, and I got a Helix, which was like instantly took down all the noise by like 40%. I slapped a DI everywhere that I could, and I got rid of 2 old mixers that I was using and I use one mixer now called the Touch Mix 8
Okay.
QSC, and it does the job of what my both old mixers were doing with no noise. And I was just really fortuitous because then COVID hit, and then all of a sudden I was like already streamlined to stream and in a really sort of already dialed noiseless environment for the internet. And it was just kind of weird. Like, yeah, I still remember it now, like when COVID first hit, when the pandemic first hit, and everyone's tours were canceled within days.
Yeah.
I still remember the first music live stream of the pandemic lockdown was John Legend on Instagram Live, just playing Love's in Need of Love Tonight by Stevie Wonder. And like it was so iconic like, I was like, wow, this is gonna be what happens now. Like everyone's gonna be streaming and trying to stay alive. And it was totally cool because everyone had to make makeshift home broadcasting situations. And those of us that were already in it, those of us that were already making podcasts and already in that sort of school were already had to jump on it. But then the pandemic forced everyone that wasn't in to get in if they were going to get in.
That's right. Yeah.
And then you had Twitch channels. And the next thing you know, I had a Restream account, and I was streaming to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram at the same time, with most of those platforms having the chat amalgamated in one column. So but now, like never before, I'm sitting here playing a set, cyber busking basically, but also having people from my Facebook list, my Instagram list, YouTube, and Twitch all coming in at the same time and all talking to me at the same time during every song. It's like, it was a level of interaction that I never had live.
Yeah. But you can't get that live because you don't have the opportunity to speak to everyone in the crowd, right?
For sure. And you can't be like, oh, hi, cousins in another city during the middle of your, so that was really cool that united us in that way for that time. And in the first few months of the novelty of the pandemic was still very real, and people were still very locked down. And it was just it was a really cool effect of that thing. And then obviously things started to open back up, and there was maybe a trickle of life that happened. And I was lucky that I was even able to book a tour in August, and that was based on like a private gig, but then I connected the dots around that anchor date, and I was able to play at Guilt & Co in Vancouver, Dublin Gate and Whistler, Lil Ronnie's Beachside Barbecue in Tofino, and a few other places. And I was lucky because, without that one private date, I wouldn't have been able to be like, you know what, this is for sure going to be a good deal. Like, I'm sure I won't lose any money going out to the West Coast and back from Winnipeg.
Yeah. Well, the drive alone, right, is yeah.
Yeah, and like there's not a lot there at the time, and even now there's really not a lot to hit in Saskatchewan and Alberta, especially because of the health crisis there. And it's just dodgy right now. So
For sure. Do you I mean, obviously again the pandemic has affected everyone everyone's everything, but are you hoping that, now that you're established in Winnipeg, to go back to having a full band, like get some local musicians to work with you, or are you sticking with the stuff you're doing now with the looping, or
I
both?
mean, obviously I'm open to everything. The looping and the solo work has been my bread and butter, and playing with musicians is never going to be not a thing. Like
Yeah,
playing or collaborating song, right? So it's just a matter of having the space and having the time together again, so.
yeah.
But it's been really cool. Like Winnipeg's just got such a array of crazy talented individuals, so it's going to be really exciting.
Do you think that like sonically, I mean, do you consider yourself to be more of a funk artist than anything else? Or I mean, I know it's kind of mutable, right? You have the singer-songwriter stuff. You do seem to delve into pop at times. What do you sort of consider yourself to be, as for if you had to slap a genre on it?
I mean, I would say funk,
Yeah,
I would say funk, soul,
yeah. So
and
what
there's a
what drew you to that? I mean, I love that stuff too. But what was the appeal for you as a musician when you first started getting into funk and soul? Like what made that the thing you wanted to pursue?
I just feel like the energy that, artists like Stevie Wonder and everyone that came after him bring is kind of what got me into music in the first place. And just everything that has to do with, you know, that soul, and but also like, the fatness. I
Yeah,
don't know how to explain it, but like the fatness that I learned from getting into artists like D'Angelo and Tribe Called Quest and the Roots, and like even Led Zeppelin had a very fatness about them, like in my opinion, my top three drummers of all time would be John Bonham, maybe Stuart Copeland, and then also Amir Thompson from the Roots. Like just like I always loved drummers, and like the fatness of the fattest drummers is kind of also what got me into it as well.
it's interesting, those three guys, because they all have very different sounds, but I can definitely see the through line between them. I mean, like, Bonham and Copeland on the surface don't seem to have a lot in common, because Bonham is just bashing the shit out of the drums. But I can see it for sure. There's definitely, like, fatness is probably a good term for it. That goes through all three of those guys.
I feel like all three of them hit the snare very hard,
Yeah,
and it's like maybe Questlove might have that perfect angle and doesn't hit it quite as hard, but I don't know. I don't know maybe if that's even related, but I feel like that has something to do with tone that
yeah. Well,
makes
it's a
them.
hard thing too with drums to pick out individual tones, but I think all those guys are drummers that you can sort of identify right away, no matter who they're playing with. Eh?
Right. Yeah, and just I don't know, like yeah, like Stevie Wonder, Sade, but also the singer-songwriter side of things, like Elliott Smith really always kind of caught me, and like the sort of moody, intricate stuff really vibe with me as well.
Cool. So, what was is sax your primary instrument?
Sax would be my main weapon, I would say, of
Okay.
choice.
And then you play what, guitar, keyboards? What else?
Or a
Seems
bit of
like you got a
keyboard,
lot in there.
some drums, vocals, and I also beatbox, and I don't percussion counts, I think,
Yeah.
if you're playing it properly with some shakers and some cool stuff. But I would say yeah, sax, vocals, guitar, drums, and then some keyboards and some synths and stuff in there.
How long have you been playing sax for? Like, do you have a? I mean, with sax players, it seems like there's either the typical background, especially among the sax players I know anyway, which is they're going through from a very young age and then just getting super into it and doing all these high level, training, or it's people who just pick it up and find some kind of affinity for it and develop it from there. Like, what was your background as a sax player?
Very much public school.
Yeah.
I was born in Toronto. I lived in Toronto till I was 13, and the North York public school system just got me started. And sax was my second choice. My first pick was drums.
Okay.
Third pick was French horn. I never picked up the French horn, but maybe I was lucky that way. But yeah, sax. self-taught, and then a few years, like maybe 3 years into it, I started taking private lessons. And then I've been through a few different private teachers over the years. And I opted not for post-secondary jazz training, which I had some assistance to do that if I so wanted, but I opted for the science route, and I went to UBC on a partial science ride.
Okay.
Mostly to keep me in Vancouver, and mostly to keep me close to my network and get some bands started in Vancouver when I was young. And that's exactly what happened. And a couple of years later, that band that I started way back then got signed to network, and
Oh, cool.
that was the first group that started to get some momentum for me and let me think that maybe music could be a thing that I could do long term.
Yeah, which is kind of rare because there's so many people. I mean, just over the course of doing this show, I'm doing it for 8.5 years, and then number of bands that have come and gone sort of in that time that didn't make music a career. They might have made some great stuff, but for whatever reasons, life got in the way, or jobs and education, families and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely if you have an opportunity to do it, right, it's something you want to grab while you can.
Yeah, and I think that my journey in Vancouver was quite unique. Having a chance to go on the road right away right out of university, cutting my university experience short.
Yeah.
For sciences, but which was kind of half the plan. And then when I came back, and that band sort of ran its course, and we kind of went our ways, still great friends, but then I was already set up to sort of venture onto my next chapter, which was, a really grassroots level, community style, ground up procession of I started an open mic night that I ended up hosting for a decade and a half.
Oh, wow.
Ended up seeing absolutely everyone that came through the city came through that open mic night at the Anza Club. And I released records with groups that formed in and around that community. And then I eventually passed the torch on to some local rappers, which were, some of the more enthusiastic community members at my open mic night. But that's not to say that there was a great number of, songwriters, comedians, like everything. Everybody came through there. And then there was like a period of gigging. It's just like gigging, and Vancouver's got a lot of corporate backdrop work if you can handle doing it, but it's a slippery slope because it can kind of lead you off into a very non-artistic side of the musical world.
Yeah. Well, there's that here too, I think. I don't know if it's to the same extent, but there definitely are people that I know who have gone from being creative and making their own music to finding like a lucrative kind of path that way, and are professional musicians and still doing it for a living, which is awesome. But yeah, they're doing private functions and cover bands and things like that, and it's a different pathway for sure.
For sure. And you know what, at this point I would definitely be down with just about anything because COVID definitely made everything go away. But I don't know, I was really thrilled on my trip to Tofino and back in August with just what was able to happen. And my night at Guilt & Co, I think, was maybe my favorite show that I've ever had in August. And it was just like it was a perfect combination of having been there in a long time, and everyone came, and the energy was just right. And even though there was no dancing, it was just like, I don't know, it was about as close to a perfect night as I could have had. So and there was a few of them like that on the tour, so I feel really blessed after that trip.
How does that feel from the stage? Because you're playing a kind of music that is very upbeat and does obviously lend itself to dancing. I mean, funk is about movement, basically, right? So how does that feel watching the crowd and knowing that they're not allowed to? Like, it's not that they don't want to dance to what you're doing, right? It's that they're forbidden. Is that a weird kind of thing to observe as you're playing?
If they're vibing and they're moving, even though if they're not on the dance floor, and like definitely Guilt & Co is famous for the dance floor, even though that's not happening, I could just really feel the energy. And like, there's nothing better than at the end of a song having a great ovation and a great reciprocal feeling come back from the crowd. And like, there was that, and there was also like a lot of my really most favorite local heavy friend musicians that were also to the side of me, and like I would normally maybe be a bit nervous, but I was like really stoked. And I was just like, wow, I can't wait to shred for these guys right now and just like do my thing and try really hard not to suck.
What is the I mean, things, obviously the pandemic's still going on. I'm so sick of talking about the pandemic. I'm sure you are too, but things are sort of, it seems like they're sort of getting better. I mean, so far anyway, right? So what is sort of your next move then? I mean, you're in Winnipeg, shows are starting to slowly start happening again. What are you going to be doing in the next few months?
I'm going to be doing everything I can to break into Ontario. It's like I actually played in Kenora a couple years ago. I came out here and played for Winterruption, and also booked a date at a spot in Kenora. And it was like a tiny little mini weekend tour that I hit to Winnipeg and came back. And yeah, I would just love to trickle my way down into Ontario and be able to play for my friends in Toronto.
Yeah.
Eventually. Ontario has just been so locked down still, and everything's kind of still not back up and running. So it's really not open yet. Like for guys like me and even, more established, represented artists, you're not seeing a lot of them. They're hitting, there's big events that are, well supported and have the infrastructure to handle it or whatever. And you can guarantee all those spots are definitely, spoken for by heavily represented, mainstream artists, which is fine. And that's their job. And I feel like they've taken even more of a hit per capita. The band, I feel bad for the bands that were, full bird touring, selling out theaters when that happened, because they really took a hit, and I don't know, I feel not just them, like anyone that was in a big production that got shut down, not just,
Well, yeah, a lot of those people have nothing to fall back on, right? Because they put all their eggs in that basket, and it's been sustaining them for as long as it has, and then suddenly, boom, it's just over, right?
Yeah. So everything that's coming back is so deserved, and I really hope that more artists come back from the brink.
Yeah. Where can people hear you? I mean, if people are hearing about you for the first time on the show, what's the best option to track down your music, find out when you're playing live, that kind of thing?
I mean, my Spotify's got all my albums, and every little bit helps on there. Any follower on Spotify is great. My IG, I would say, is the most up to date way to keep track of my dates that come down, as well as my website, alexmahermusic.com.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty much grinding in Winnipeg and out of this region. I got a show coming up on November 5th at Torque with the Steadies from Saskatoon, featuring Errol Pereira from the Wide Mouth Mason years. And yeah, it's kind of like now for me, I got to keep something on the dashboard coming up in a month or 2 months, and I got to keep an eye on staying on top of my own thing, or else if I don't, it's just gonna go and you're gonna see me swinging a shovel in Wolseley's on a construction crew.
Yeah.
That might still happen actually, but we'll see what happens.
That's honest work, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you have a couple of records out now, right now. What is it, 2 EPs or what do you have so far that's available?
There's 2 EPs that are still in print. One from 2017 called Ether, which is kind of more of a sort of an alt soul. It's got kind of a moody Elliott Smith kind of thing, but more like I don't know, it's John Mayer-ish as well. Kind of driving soul. That was more of like a full band studio production. And then Dream Final is my newest EP from 2020, and that's more of in the pop soul realm, pop soul funk realm, I would say. That was produced by my good friend Ryan Stewart, who's produced a ton of artists. If you look him up, he's got a pretty good resume these days.
Cool.
And yeah, and I'm compiling a new LP. It's definitely going to have reflections of all the new synth that I've incorporated in my rig, and it's going to have a lot of fatness. And yeah, I don't know, I'm really excited for the next catalog of songs I'm about to put out.
That's dope. I'm looking forward to hearing it too. But one thing I was going to ask you earlier that I completely forgot about, and I'm remembering it now before I let you go, is when you're playing the stuff that you've recorded with a full band, how difficult is it for you to replicate it with loops and as a solo artist? Do you completely change the structure of the song, or do you try to keep it as true to the original full band version that's possible to do as a one man thing?
For sure. I definitely try to cover as many bases as I can that are getting covered in the production. And most of them are pretty easily able to hit. However, transitioning from uh, a verse progression of chords into a whole other, chorus progression or B section or C section,
Yeah.
sometimes it's isn't as easy to accomplish arrangement wise within the loop environment. So it can be sort of mimicked and sort of hit with more of a structural dynamic breakdown where I can build the groove, I can do the chorus, make the groove really fat, but then shift gears and then break it down half a section and do the chorus or do the second section, but just on guitar with
Okay.
the beat broken down, and then come back to it and build it back up. And so you gotta be sort of mindful of the dynamics when you're doing that, but it's definitely attainable and not to the same arrangement degree that you can with the whole band. And even to that extent, like with the band, the songs that I select are different too. Like I wouldn't play songs with my band that I could just loop. I'll do songs like, What a Fool Believes by the Doobie Brothers that are just like more elaborate arrangements that I wouldn't be able to do loop wise.
You want to take advantage of having everyone there that you can use all of their different sounds and talents. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And also to that effect, in Vancouver, having a 6-piece band is like having a pet elephant, and it's very expensive to feed.
Sure. I definitely believe that.